Jesus, the Savior, is worthy of our worship. What are some things that you can buy or activities that you can do that you consider worth it? Anybody have any comments? What do you think? What would you consider worth it?
Vacation with your family.
Yes. Anything else? Time in Scripture, worth it. Prayer, worth it. I came up with things or activities that benefit you or your family you would consider worth it. How do you determine the worth of something how do you think the worth of something is determined? If you go to buy something, who determines that value or that worth? What's that?
What your need is.
What your need is. Yeah.
Time saver.
Time saver, yeah. The simple answer that who determines the worth is you. You determine that worth. Only the individuals can make a choice. So it's all in what you are willing to pay for that item or activity. Have you ever heard the phrase, value is in the eye of the beholder? It's true. So you are the determiner of the worth. The context of the lesson today, there's some subtle differences between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they kind of try to target different audiences. Mark and Luke, they kind of wrote to the Gentiles. Matthew, on the other hand, he primarily wrote to the Jewish audience. His purpose was to provide irrefutable proofs that Jesus was the long-promised Messiah. So we're gonna review some of those proofs that Matthew had in our lesson today. The Christmas stories. You know what Mass means in Christmas? It means festival or celebration. So when we say Christmas, we're really saying Christ's Mass, a special time to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And the book of Luke has the most Christmas story detail. The angel, Gabriel, coming to Mary, and the Bethlehem trip for the census and the birth in the stable. There's a lot of details in the Luke story of the birth. But today, we're going to look at Matthew. Just a couple things and on this lesson, you can take all kind of bunny trails. It's amazing what jumps out when you look at this lesson. I mean, you could look at the meanings of the gifts, and it's just all kind of stuff. But anyway, the meaning of Bethlehem means the house of bread. John 6:32, Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, Moses didn't give you the bread from heaven, but the Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the one who comes down from the heaven and gives life to the world." That's Jesus, right? So the meaning of Bethlehem, where he was born, is house of bread. What's the purpose of a manger? John, what's the purpose of a manger? You're a farmer. What's the purpose? Feed, right? To feed. So think about that. The bread of life was laid in the manger to feed. Interesting, huh? The manger was a sign. When the angel appeared to the shepherds in the field to invite them to visit the newborn king, he told them to look for a baby in the manger. And you can read Luke 2 there, 11 and 12. The manger just wasn't a sign for the shepherds. It's a sign to all of us that Jesus is accessible to everyone who seeks him. The shepherds would not have had access to the baby born in a royal place, and as strangers, they probably wouldn't even have had access to a baby born in the confines of a family home. God knew what he was doing. But in a manger, it was accessible to all and us. And did you know the lambs that were sacrificed in the temple were raised in the close proximity of Jerusalem in a little town called Bethlehem? So the sacrificial lamb in Jesus was born in the town of Bethlehem, where they raised lambs for sacrificial reasons for the temple. That's amazing to me. So the importance of knowing Old Testament prophecies about Jesus. And I think Matthew was trying to make points here that, listen, guys, this was proven many years ago, and now it's coming true. So, two reasons. It validates that God is faithful to his promises. It also verifies that Jesus is the promised Messiah. If God made specific promises that never came true, then one would question if God was true, right? Credibility is on the line if promises are not kept. These prophecies about Jesus validates Jesus as the Messiah. Jesus fulfilled over 300 prophecies. There is no coincidence because the odds are astronomical. Dr. Stoner, he was a chairman of Science Division at Westmont College and author of the book called Science Speaks, wrote, "Any man who rejects Christ as the Son of God is rejecting a fact proved more absolutely than any other fact in the world." There's no way that these prophets could have made these predictions hundreds of years prior to what exactly was going to happen if it wasn't for divine reasons, right? So Matthew incorporated these numerous Old Testament prophecies, and there's many in the book of Matthew, but we're only going to look at 3 today. Keep in mind, these Old Testament prophecies were written and declared hundreds of years before Jesus' birth. The first Old Testament prophecy was Jesus' lineage. And I'm not going to read all these scriptures because we got to roll today, but Matthew begins his gospel account by tracing the genealogy of Jesus back to David and Abraham to emphasize Jesus' Jewish heritage. And if you look at these scriptures, Genesis 49:10, the scepter will not depart from Judah. Of course, we know David came from Judah. And then Isaiah 9:6-7, over his kingdom to establish and sustain it. On the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it. So there's proof that many years ago, hundreds of years ago, it was prophesied that Jesus would come from Judah and David. The second Old Testament prophecy was the virgin birth. In Matthew 1:23, he referenced Isaiah 7:14. See the virgin. And in Isaiah 7:14, see the virgin. 700 years prior to Jesus' birth, this was prophesied. A supernatural conception birth of Jesus was a direct fulfillment of Isaiah 7:14. And the third one we're looking at today is the birth location. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and that was prophesied in Micah 5:2. Bethlehem, you are small among the clans of Judah. One will come from you to be ruler over Israel. For me, his origin is from antiquity, from ancient times. Micah was written over 700 years before Christ was born. So there's at least 3 prophecies in today's lesson that proves that Jesus is the Messiah. But our lesson today kind of focuses on the Magi, the wise men. And notice there's 3 reactions. If you read your lesson, there's 3 reactions to the king's birth. There's the Magi, which is the wise men's reaction. They traveled a long way to worship the new king. Herod the Great, what was his reaction? Hate, jealousy, paranoia. He wanted to kill baby Jesus. And the chief priests and scribes, which this has amazed me. I would like to talk to Roanne a little bit more about this. The indifference that the chief priests and scribes had to the Messiah's birth. No interest in investigating what all the fuss was about the Messiah birth. It's just amazing. So they knew Scripture. They knew it word for word. But they didn't have any faith or any interest in looking for the Messiah. Even if it was a possibility, wouldn't you go check it out? I would. The other thing I thought about too was maybe King Herod stifled their celebrations or any thought of checking out the Messiah because, as we're going to look into it, King Herod was a ruthless guy. We'll get into that here in a minute. But, you ever have those days at work when you just want to hide from the boss? Maybe your boss is in a bad mood and you just want to keep a low profile. And maybe they were like that. If we don't talk about it, we won't upset him. So the first section in your lesson is Seeking the King. It's Matthew 2:1-3. It's page 32 of your book. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born the King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So again, the New Testament has two stories of Jesus' birth, which is Matthew and Luke. Matthew recorded an incident that happened within the first 2 years of Jesus' birth. So the lesson we have today is not actually right at the birth of Jesus. It's sometime after. We don't know how long after, but it was sometime after, within 2 years. Who were the wise men from the east? The Greek word is magi and is root for our English word called magic. However, these men were not magicians or sorcerers. So if you look up magi and wise men, you find Daniel 2, 48 and 49. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief governor over all the wise men of Babylon. And then it goes on to mention Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So in Daniel's time, there were wise men in Babylon. And so now there's thoughts that maybe that's where the wise men came from, either there or Persia. So another map showing you the area that the wise men may have come from. And this city is called Susa. This area is called Babylon. Somewhere in this area they're thought to come from, which it came from the east. So somewhere in this area, which would be modern-day Iraq or modern-day Iran. So once they saw the star, they started traveling towards Jerusalem. Then we get to this map, and it shows Jerusalem and then Bethlehem. So that's the map. And that's hundreds of miles. Actually, it's about 800 miles. The journey would have taken them 3 months or more if you say they walked or traveled on camel, say 10 miles a day. By the time they got to Jerusalem, it could be months, and it was quite a journey for them. But that's what we're going to look at today, is their faith to follow the star, to look for the Messiah. And yet, the chief priests and the scribes were a day's walk away from Bethlehem. They didn't care to go check it out. Seeking the king. These were wise men, were astronomers or astrologers who played prominent political and religious roles in eastern countries, most notably Persia, modern-day Iran or Iraq. The region of Persia once was under the rule of Babylonians. Recall that Jewish people were exiled to this area after the destruction of Jerusalem around 587 BC. It could be through Daniel and the other people living in Babylon that a messianic expectation arose in the area. These wise men may have been influenced by the Jewish prophetical writings concerning the Messiah, especially the writings of Daniel. Based on their studies and observations of signs in the sky, they made their way to Jerusalem. These men could very well have been God-fearers and asking about where is he who has been born the King of Jews, tells us that they knew what they were looking for. It seems to me they were studied. They knew what they were looking for. The wise men were alerted to the Messiah's birth by seeing a star at its rising. The star reappeared then, led them to Bethlehem and the house where the Christ child was born. Have you ever wondered who else saw the star? If Herod would have saw the star, wouldn't that have alerted him where Jesus was? Maybe only the wise men could see the star. I thought about that. I don't have any answers, but I thought about it. And Roanne, I don't know if you have any comments on that or not.
No, but it does seem that several stars probably came together to make that bright light, and probably the common people were not even looking for that. So we couldn't have been a big bright light. It may have just been what they, as astrologers, would look for to be out of the ordinary.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, good point. Never thought of that. Very good. And just so you know, stars normally, if you ever look at the sky and you have a delayed timeline on your camera, normally the stars move from east to west. That's due to the Earth's rotation. But the Star of Bethlehem led the Magi from Jerusalem south to Bethlehem and directly to where Joseph and Mary were staying. So, it wasn't your average star. King Herod, let's talk about King Herod a minute. He ruled from about 37 BC to about 3 or 4 BC. While he was known for many building projects and extensive renovation of the Jerusalem temple, he was better known for his insane fear of losing his throne. And when I say insane, he was insane. He exhibited constant paranoia that someone was going to steal it. He had his wife, 3 sons, brother-in-law, mother-in-law, all killed because he thought they were plotting against him to take his throne. Can you imagine? He is something else. So listen to this. It's reported that as he approached death, he had leading citizens of Jerusalem imprisoned. From the instructions upon his death, they were to be killed. His reasoning was, no one would weep when he died, but at least when these prominent Jews died, there would be weeping on the day of his death. Can you imagine? They're not tears for me, but I want somebody crying.
What if they follow through on that? I mean, because they give that order to your soldiers or somebody. Wonder if they thought, hey, they're not going to be too dead for you. We're not killing.
Do you know, Roanne, if he carried through?
This is the first I've heard that.
Yeah.
That's just historic facts that you got.
It's in the book. Plus, I've read it other places. Yeah. Whether it actually happened, Terry, I don't know, but there had been intermarriage between Jews and Edomites, and Herod publicly identified himself as a Jew, although he was not faithful to observe the Jewish law. So just a quick timetable, and you probably can't see it real well, so we're not going to spend much time. Just of the King Herod's and his sons' ruling years. And the other thing I want you to notice too, have you ever noticed the BCE and CE on timelines? That's the secular world. What they're trying to do, so BC means before Christ, AD means after the birth of Christ, but there's a Latin term for it, anon. Yes, year of the Lord. It's the year of the Lord. So those are what we Christians observe is BC and AD. But the secular world has come up with, so they don't want to associate Christ's birth as a determining factor on the timeline. So what they use is before Common Era and Common Era. Yeah. They don't want to reference Christ in anything. But it's the same timeline. It's the same time that BCE and CE are divided as Christ's birth. They just don't want to mention Jesus. So I want to throw that fact out to you because I didn't know that till recently. And also, Scott Breedlove and I talked about this. There's some confusion about the BC and AD because it says that in your book that Jesus was born about 6 BC. Well, if that's the defining factor on AD BC, then it wouldn't be 0. But so this is the answer. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but the confusing concerning Jesus' birth year originates from several errors. Imagine that, humans made errors made by a 6th century Scythian monk named Dionysius, who was the originator of the designations BC AD. And you can look that up yourself. But he was a Christian monk, and he desired to create a new division of history that started the year of Jesus' birth. He attempted to calculate Jesus' birth year, and he made several critical errors. However, one should not castigate too badly, since the historical records available to him were not as accurate as those available today. So, obviously, he didn't have the internet or Facebook to find out what's going on, right? Consequently, with respect to the year of Jesus' birth, he was off by at least 4 years. Some scholars say Jesus was born in 6, 4, and 2 BC, but nobody really knows for sure. So that's the discrepancy, and that's why you'll see in your book it says Jesus was born in 6 BC. So back to our lesson. So the news to the wise men of a new claimant to the throne would have sent Herod into a deep panic, as well as all of Jerusalem around him. Can you imagine the wise men coming to him and all of his reports, they're like, oh boy, Herod's going to throw a fit with this. I can't imagine. And that's what I said. If you remember, in your career working time, you imagine having your boss day, your boss having a bad day, and you're like, I'm just going to try to keep a low profile and stay out of their way. So finding the king, Matthew 4 through 8, it's on page 34. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Messiah would be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I can go worship him too. Was he planning on worshiping him? No, he was going to try to kill him. So Herod was the Roman appointed king of the Jews and supposedly converted to Judaism, but I don't think he had much interest in that. He had no clue of the Jewish prophecy concerning the Messiah. The chief priests and scribes were called in. The chief priests would have included the high priest and leading priest in charge of the 24 divisions of priests who ministered the temple. So he was consulting them. The religious leaders reported that Messiah would be born in Bethlehem of Judea. Now there is two Bethlehems, so prophecy does specify Bethlehem of Judea. Bethlehem's about 5 to 6 miles south of Jerusalem. So in that time, it would have been about maybe a 2-hour walk from Jerusalem to Bethlehem to find out what's going on. Bethlehem was located on the main road going from Jerusalem to Egypt and was the ancestral home of King David. To verify this report, the religious leaders cited the announcement of the prophet Micah. We went over that a few minutes ago. Herod begins his murderous plot to try to kill baby Jesus, the Messiah. He quietly enlisted the wise men unknowingly to be his spies and tell them about ask them when did the star appear. Herod was trying to figure out how old the child would be because he was already developing his plan. This information would be helpful when he issued a death warrant for every male child 2 years and under. Herod wanted the wise men to find the child and report back to him the location. Herod had no intent to worship the Christ child. So worshiping the king, Matthew 9 through 12. After hearing the king, they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had been as rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. So the wise men didn't realize what Herod was doing. They didn't realize his evil plan yet. But after leaving Jerusalem, the star was rising again, and it led them until it came to above the house where Jesus was. And to me, that's a divine light. I mean, it's just a divine light leading them to the exact house. This is the first time the star is mentioned of moving. Whatever the wise men were seeing, they interpret as divine guidance, and I believe it was. The wise men were overwhelmed with joy. The Greek text piles on superlatives here. They gladly rejoiced with exceedingly abundant joy and delight. Can you imagine seeing the baby Messiah? All the weeks and months, even years of anticipation were complete. They had reached their goal. The joy they experienced, no doubt, was brought about by the fact that the star pinpointed the very house in which Joseph, Mary, and the Christ child were living. Can you imagine that joy? It reminds me of that song, I Can Only Imagine. And you know the words of that. And I listen to that a lot, and I think, what will I do when I see Jesus? I'm not going to sing that for you. So entering the house indicates that some time had passed since the manger scene portrayed in Luke 2. Mary and Joseph and Jesus were now staying in a house. The word worship means to fall prostrate before that Jesus. The gesture showed that the wise men were true seekers of God. Think about that. The light was shown to true seekers of God. It wasn't shown to the Herod. It wasn't shown to the chief priests. It was shown to the true seekers of God. God had spoken to them through the star, and they responded to his call by following the star and worshiping the Messiah. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh were gifts typically given to royalty. Gold was a precious metal of great value in the ancient world, as it is today. Gold's valuable today. Frankincense and myrrh were costly, fragrant perfumes of spices used in worship and adoration. And it is possible that Joseph and Mary sold these gifts to finance their trip to Egypt, because they had to flee Egypt because of Herod's plan. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So anybody ever smell frankincense and myrrh? You put frankincense on your knee?
Yeah, when we went to sing, I thought, well, I've got gold necklace on, I got frankincense on my knee. I think I'll hold off on the myrrh.
Well, bless your heart. I had never smelled frankincense and myrrh, and I was over visiting the Breedloves yesterday, and Tammy had frankincense and myrrh. I said, I got to smell it. So she brought it out. Frankincense was a very sweet, very, very fragrant smell. I liked it. Myrrh, not so much. It was a little bitter. But there's a whole lot of meaning in behind those gifts, too. I mean, you can look into myrrh, and if it's mixed with wine, it's good for pain. It's used for embalming. So there's a whole lot of signs involved of why they gave that to Jesus. So anyway, that's a whole other story. I don't have time to go into that. You can research that yourself. So the dreams played an important part in Matthew's account of the birth of Jesus. In chapter 1, verses 20 through 25, Joseph received assurance from God in a dream concerning Mary's pregnancy. In 2:12, wise men were warned not to go back to Herod. And in 2:13, Joseph was warned in a dream to flee Bethlehem to Egypt. So dreams were an important part. While they did not perceive Herod's wicked scheme, God knew and warned them to avoid Herod. Once again, the wise men were obedient to God's leading. God had led them to their home, or God had led them to leave their home and travel to Bethlehem to see the Christ child, and then led them back to their home along a different route. And I heard a pastor make a comment about that different route. They said, after you see, worship, or accept and worship Jesus, we all take a different route, don't we? We don't follow our old ways. So the rest of the story, and I got to wrap this up. We got 10 minutes. So the rest of the story, I'm not going to leave you hanging here for the rest of Matthew chapter 2. Following the visit by the wise men, Joseph was warned by an angel of Herod's plan to kill the baby. Joseph took Mary and the baby, Jesus, to Egypt, a journey of over 400 miles. Herod's plot to kill all male children in Bethlehem 2 years old or younger was his solution to keep his throne from being stolen by the newborn king of the Jews. Matthew quoted another Old Testament passage, Jeremiah 31:15, which prophesied about the death of the children of Bethlehem. And I'll let you look that up. After Herod's death, Joseph brought his family back from Egypt and settled in Nazareth, the hometown of Mary and Joseph. Can you imagine? Again, we know this guy's insane. He's very insane. But can you imagine having every male child 2 years and younger in the Bethlehem region killed? Can you imagine? And then can you imagine being his soldiers having to do it? Think about that. Sick. So, back to the reactions. 3 reactions to a king's birth. Who worshipped? The shepherds in Luke and the wise Gentiles, or the Magi. They traveled a long way to worship the new king. Who wanted him dead? Herod the Great. Who was indifferent? The chief priests and scribes, teachers of the law. No interest in investigating what all the fuss was about. Let's look at the 3 reactions to the king of the Jews at his death. Who worshipped him? Fishermen, tax collectors, sinners. Who wanted him dead? The teachers of the law and the Sanhedrin. Who was indifferent? The current ruler, Herod Antipas, who is Herod the Great's son. I find that interesting. Wise advice from wise men. The wise person will marvel at the complex beauty of creation. And I do. I love creation. It speaks to me from God, His creation. See the damage resulting from evil of selfishness and recognize your need to seek the Creator and be restored. A wise person knows your King has come to set you free and make you new again. His worth is greater than gold. He is our sweet-scented sacrifice. He has eliminated our pain and removed the stench of death. Let's look at the unwise, selfish, or foolish people. You are the king of your own life, and you resist Jesus. You're absolutely right. Jesus changes everybody and everything. Your life will be rearranged by Him. He would be the king of your entire life. If you love your current life, you want Jesus to go away. And I guess the teachers of the law, the scribes, the Sanhedrin, they love their current life. They knew Scripture, but they liked the control and they liked what they had. And they wanted Jesus to go away. If you want to be the king of you, Jesus is your biggest threat. And I remember that stage of my life. You know, I wanted all the blessings of God, but I wasn't willing to give everything to Jesus. I remember those days, and we probably all do, right? You know, Tony and I were talking before Sunday school. If we would have known the peace and joy that we have now, we would have did it years ago. We just didn't know. But there is a peace and joy that you cannot explain to people. So back to the unwise or selfish people. You can't be bothered by this Jesus is the Messiah. It's all a big myth. Seriously? Moving stars, a virgin birth, ancient prophecies, a great king? I'm way too smart to believe stuff like that. And we know there's scientists that say that, right? It's all just an ancient myth. I don't need a king. I am self-made, answer to no one. I'm busy with important things. I can't be bothered. And we all know people like that, right? So, let's be more like the Magi and look up. Look back over your life. Be honest about your relationships, your accomplishments, and life's decisions. Look around you. How are you doing? If you have more pluses than minuses, then it might be more difficult for you to invite Jesus into your life. And that's true. When things are going really good, I don't need Jesus. I'm good. Look inward. God asks of you what He asked of the Magi. Seek. That's it. Just seek, and ye shall find. They sought the star. They followed the star. Like the Magi, look up. Matthew 7 and 8. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be open. It's open to all. So how can we apply this text? We recognize Jesus as the one true King. We can know that Jesus is King because His birth fulfilled Old Testament prophecy. Many, many, many Old Testament prophecies. And the odds of that happening, I heard somebody talk, it's lots of zeros on the end of that number, that the odds of all those prophecies being filled by one person, it's astronomical. So, it's true. We can acknowledge that Jesus as King and worthy of our worship, right? Any comments? Questions? Roanne? Yeah. Well, Merry Christmas to everybody. Enjoy the upcoming programs. I guess the kids program is supposed to be really, really good. So I encourage you to come to the kids program tonight. So Merry Christmas and thank you.
Merry Christmas. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
I don't go much. hate talking about that.